The Democratic National Committee, news on this interesting front, too. They voted this weekend to dramatically reduce the power and influence of superdelegates in the party's presidential nomination process. That overcame objections from a vocal minority of the DNC's membership. The change will prohibit superdelegates from voting for a nominee at the Democratic convention unless the process becomes deadlocked. In other words, they don't vote on the first ballot. DNC Chairman Tom Perez called it a historic day for the Democratic Party, saying, quote, "We passed major reforms that will not only put our next presidential nominee in the strongest position possible, but will help us elect Democrats up and down the ballot." I'm fascinated by this. The superdelegates started in 1984. Every time you've started to get a close Democratic race, which has happened a few times since then, you hear the complaints about, the will of the people is going to be subverted by the superdelegates. We've never actually had the deadlock scenario in the superdelegate era. I'm wondering, though, I'm looking at this Democratic field for 2020 saying if there's 20 people out there, it doesn't seem crazy, 20 Democrats out there running, is this going to be the one cycle when you actually need the superdelegates? You need somebody to break a tie.
Well, I'm not sure. What I do know is this. In the 2016 election, there was grumbling that the process was rigged because most folks said that Hillary Clinton was way ahead because many of the superdelegates had already committed before one vote was cast. The second thing I would say is that young voters, young Democratic voters, the folks who are out there in Virginia, who are out there in Alabama, the folks who are organizing, knocking on doors, there was at least a deep suspicion and skepticism about the superdelegates. If they did not make a change, that skepticism would have deepened even more. And they need those foot soldiers. Yeah. They need them to turn out.
Yeah, it's a hard from arguing for the idea of, everybody's got a stake in democracy, everybody's got a role, everybody's got to vote. It's a hard thing to sell from that angle. But again, I'm looking at it, and you could always say, you'll go broke betting on the brokered convention. It never actually happens. And I'm actually looking ahead to 2020 and saying
20 possible candidates.
Maybe it'll happen, and then you'll need it, right?
Exactly. Look, these were huge reforms. Tom Perez, I commend him for his leadership on this. There was obviously a lot of resistance, but this was a way to unify the party here and make it clear to all the Democratic voters out there, and even those who are not part of the Democratic Party, but who were hoping to pull in independents, college-educated Republican women going into 2020 to say, you know what, the party activists, the party stalwarts are not going to be the ones making this decision. Now, we know again in 2016, superdelegates did not make the decision, of course. But there was a perception out there, a misperception, but there was still a perception out there that they had undue influence. And this is completely ridding our party going into 2019 and 2020 that happened.
Let's play that. If you got a scenario here where, candidate A has got, 1,600 delegates, candidate B's got 1,550, and the magic number is 2,000, and nobody wins it on the first ballot, and then suddenly now they introduce this flood of superdelegates, and the winning margin would that, in this day and age, would that outcome be accepted as legitimate?
It could. And I was on Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign, and part of my job in the last few months of the campaign was to corral superdelegates to support her. So, again, in this scenario, we have not had a scenario like this in God knows how long, that we may have a typical, what the GOP primary went through in 2016 with that many candidates. So, but again, at the same time, that is irrelevant to me. What matters is that Tom Perez is showing that he is bringing the party together. He is unifying. This is very important to get the Bernie Sanders supporters to come back into the fold and to support Tom Perez as chairman, and also to feel that they are an inclusive part of the Democratic Party.
Because I do feel, Noel, too, there's a bit of a lesson on the Republican side. They don't have superdelegates, but we talked so much in 2016. Remember the unpledged delegates, and there was that idea for a while, the Republican establishment, if they could keep Trump just below that magic number, they could override it with that. And it seemed like there was a lesson there of Republicans theoretically having some power to at least make it difficult for Trump, but resisting because they said they feared the idea that their voters wouldn't accept it.
Oh, yeah. And it breeds it's a culture of corruption. I mean, with these delegates, to your point, the schmoozing, the things that you have to do. It's almost as like that, one is trying to bribe more and try to do this. It is really a corrupt, I think,
It's an outdated process.
It just really is. Yeah. So, I mean, hats off to you that you had to do that. It's tough. It really is. I just think it breeds. It's just a slimy part of the election process, if you ask.
And Eddie, you talk about those Bernie voters, those young folks in particular, that was where the noise was coming from on these in 2016.
Well,
does this bring peace to the Democratic
certainly
Party?
is one huge step towards peace, right? The idea that the superdelegates, these folks who are politicians, folks who are perceived to be in the pocket of Wall Street, these folks who behind closed doors who are making decisions before one vote is cast, right? These folk are objects of skepticism. They are the Republican light folks, as some of the activists believe. And if these folks are going to be on the ground, that is the young folk, if they're going to be on the ground working hard for the Democratic Party, working hard for a progressive agenda.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.